Hello, everyone. This is Cindy Mazzaferro with Powerful Beyond Measure. I'm so happy to be speaking with a fabulous guest today and also getting an opportunity to meet and see you today as well, our listeners. So, Sebastien Richard is a John Maxwell Team certified speaker and coach. He is also the founder, along with his wife, Elizabeth, of Thriving on Purpose, a faith-based leadership training and coaching company. So I'd love to welcome you, Sebastien. Can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and what you've been doing?
Yes, well, you pretty much boiled it down there with the founding of Thriving on Purpose. I'm also the author of Lead Like a Superhero, which we will be talking about shortly. I went from being basically, I'm still transitioning, but I went from being a postal worker to a speaker and author. So it was a huge transition, and it implied a lot of major changes going on within for me to actually embrace who I really am. Because, I mean, nobody gets born on this planet saying, hey, I was meant to be a postal worker. Anyway, I doubt that that's something that's extremely fulfilling. For some people, it might be. Not for me, it wasn't. I was as disgruntled as you can imagine. And a couple of years ago, my mom passed away, and that during the process of this whole experience, God spoke to me and made me basically re-embrace my purpose, because it was something that I always wanted to do. Years and years ago, maybe 17, 18 years ago, I wanted to be, I was considering pastorate, to be a pastor. I was considering ministry. I had had some amazing experiences teaching in my local church. I loved speaking in public, even though it made me very nervous at the time. I was a young man, but I enjoyed the impact that it had on people, and it made me come alive. And for many, many reasons, I didn't follow that path, and I chose the sensible, let's get a good paying job and be responsible, and let's not do stuff that just is not, basically, I thought at the time it wasn't smart to go ahead and pastor. But what you need to understand is I'm from Quebec. I'm not an American. I'm from Canada. I was born in Montreal, Quebec. And over there, being a pastor means you will probably starve. So for me, it was very frivolous to consider that, because Quebec is it's a bastion of Catholicism. And I was considering going into evangelical pastor, being a pastor, an evangelical pastor. So I would probably not have made a huge living at it. So I told myself, let's just be sensible, get a good job. I want to get married. I want to have children. So I found a good job. Canada Post pays pretty good. I mean, considering, what you do. And so I thought that was it for me. But then I had all kinds of transitions, and I had some major episodes with depression. I was so miserable at my job. All these things combined, plus my mother passing away, and always learning more. You read. I've been reading books, spiritual growth books, and all kinds of scripture-related books, Christian growth books, since I was 18.
Right.
And you just know that you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing.
Right.
So when my mom passed away, it had a huge impact, and I finally saw. Sorry, yeah.
I was just going to stop you just because I want to be able to interact a little bit too, but also to catch you where you're saying,
Yes.
which I think is really great. And that is that you found yourself in your course of life disgruntled, disenchanted, disheartened, and depressed even. You actually said you were having some mental health issues, and that you were actually able to receive this inner wisdom, this message from God, as you refer to it as, saying that what really makes me come alive, what makes me feel happy. And I honor you, and I think what you're saying is so important to our listeners, because so many of us struggle with what's fulfilling in our life, what brings us joy. And so I think what you're saying is so pertinent. And as we get into your book and talk about how do we lead in our own lives, following our own passion is really a fabulous gift that we can give ourselves and those that we can touch the world. So I think thank you for sharing that part of your life, because it allows us to understand and relate to you that we all have difficulties in our life, and there's times throughout our lifespan, that we may feel that where has life brought us to? Is there more than this?
Yeah, and see what you're saying. It goes along the lines of uh, most people basically accept their lives. They don't lead their lives, and I was one of them. And I was miserable. I was just trying to accept my life every day, telling myself I need to accept this. It's a good paying job. It's okay. I'm providing for my family. And you try to convince yourself that this is what you're supposed to be doing. And deep down, you just know that it's not. And that's why you're miserable, right? Because
Right.
you're just not doing what you're supposed to be.
Right. So what you're saying is, so often cultural, family expectation, religious expectations, we fit this norm of getting a normal job, going to education, and that some of that we end up losing our creativity, our inner passions, and what I refer to as our spiritual gifts. What are the gifts that we have, and how can we bring them into our life that makes us feel alive, that really creates great joy in others as well? So let's get to your book. Do you have a copy that you can show us of your beautiful book?
Sure, just wait a second. It's right there.
Yeah, that's okay. I have mine behind me, so we always have to have it around. Look at this, folks.
It's upside down because of the screen thing, but it says Lead Like a Superhero, what pop culture icons can teach us about impactful leadership.
I love it. And let's get into that, because we all love superheroes, whether it's Cinderella, Superman, Batman, whatever. We have grown up with heroes in our life from very young ages, and we still go to see many of them with our children, grandchildren, and even just because we follow that superhero come to the rescue fantasy of really changing, impacting lives. Superheroes change people's lives, right? They fight for the good typically. So superheroes, although are fictional, demonstrate amazing leadership qualities. So can you tell us how you came with this idea about using them and teaching about leadership in your book? I think it's a fabulous idea.
Well, it's a process because I grew up in my teens. I had a troubled childhood. I had a my dad wasn't present in my life. He was irresponsible. He was just not a good leader. And there's things you do without knowing why you do them. So when I started reading comic books in my late teens, I really got hooked. I loved Superman. I loved Batman. And I just read those. I devoured them. So I started collecting comic books. And it's only later in life, like when I became a certified coach and speaker and leadership expert, then I was musing to myself and thinking about my favorite superheroes one day. It's just like, think about, Superman. Superman's really a good leader. Batman's a really good leader, but he doesn't lead like Superman. So I thought that was interesting. And then I kept thinking about all these names that popped up. Wonder Woman, she's a good leader too. Oh yeah, Aquaman's a good leader. Oh, Captain America, he's the best in comic book leaders. He's so good. So then I went like, oh, this is interesting. Grabbed a piece of paper, started jotting down their names. I came up with at the time I had 10 names. In the book, there's 12 of comic book icons that are very good leaders. And next to their names at the time, it took me about 5 minutes. This whole thing took me not even 5 minutes. I wrote down their names, and next to their names, I wrote down how they lead. Because they're all different. They all bring something different to the table. They all have different approaches, different personalities, and different people skills. So then once I had written it all down, I was like, oh my goodness. Now this is really good.
I love it.
I have a book. And then I started dancing around and picked up the phone, called my wife and said, hey, I have a book. I'm going to write a book. And my wife is always very, very grounded, very pragmatic. She goes like, calm down. So what's your big idea? And I told her, superheroes are great leaders, and I could write a book about how to lead like a superhero. And I started telling her what I wrote down. And my wife, who's always very, very pragmatic, like I said, and oftentimes will kind of drag me back down. I'm the dreamer. I'm the guy who has the big ideas, and she drags me back down because it has to be feasible. It has to be something you can implement.
That sounds like my husband. He's the accountant. So I can totally appreciate that.
But it's okay because we complete each other. But then this pragmatic pragmatic wife of mine goes like, this is a really good idea. So for her to say, this is a really good idea, it had to be a really great idea.
Great.
So I knew I had a book at the time. Boom, right then and there.
I love it. And what I love about it is that we can relate with different superheroes. And actually, we are ourselves a superhero. And what your book talks about are so many different types of leaders and what they bring to the forefront, if you will, whether it's in companies, in jobs, or also in families, or also just as you as a leading what you want to lead in your life. And I think so often that people use the word leader as it only relates to their job. How do I become a leader in a professional career? I'm sorry?
The image of a leader, when we say leader,
yeah.
When we say leader in our field, we often imagine the guy or the gal dressed up corporate, all buttoned down,
right.
super serious, and this is a leader. But you see, in my book, I teach that leadership is organic. It begins within. It begins with passion. It begins with leading, like we were saying earlier, your own life. Right. If you become a leader of your own life, if you stop accepting your life, embracing your, like you said, your spiritual gifts or your gifts or what you can bring to humanity and pursuing it with passion, guess what? You're becoming a leader. Exactly. And that's going to be contagious. And people are going to want to follow you because there's that passion that makes you come alive. And what the world really needs is people who come alive.
Right. I just love this. And I think it's a real playful way to grow within. I'm always, in my book about Powerful Beyond Measure, claiming your power within is finding that superhero within yourself, finding your power within yourself that allows one to be great, that allows Superman to fly the skies, allows Batman to go in his beautiful car and rescue somebody, and allows us to be great in our lives. And I just love it. And ultimately we get to the same place, but we come from it from beautiful two different ways. And I think this is just a fabulous book, and I really encourage everyone to go out and purchase it. Morgan James, I know, is your publisher, and he's mine too, and absolutely love them, don't you?
I love David Hancock. I love Morgan James. The Morgan James family is just amazing. Yeah, just what a great experience it was to get published by these guys.
So we're going to learn a little bit more about your book. I want to go into a little deeper the different types of leadership, but you can get Sebastien's book at any bookstores around the world, as well as any online site, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Indie. They go on and on. So check him out, check out his reviews, purchase his book, and really lead from within. Find your leadership skills and gifts and see how you can lead your life into really claiming your greatness. It's amazing. So Sebastien, can you go through some of the different types of leaderships? I know you talk about how Superman forges ahead like a locomotive. So what kind of leadership role
exactly
Superman versus Spider-Man? Maybe you can go through some of them for us.
I mean, they all lead differently. That's what's amazing. That's what I found so inspiring about this book. And superheroes, like you said, they inspire so many people. And the reason is, like, deep down, and it goes along the lines of your book as well, we need to feel empowered. Because we do have that power within, if we don't embrace it, we just need to feel it somewhere to get inspired to embrace it. And that's what superhero movies and comic books do. When we go see those movies, we come out, we're inspired, we feel empowered through the medium. I've seen, for example, recently there was Wonder Woman who got praised by the press and everywhere. Like, the movie was just amazing, really. And there was some good leadership examples there as well. And for example, Wonder Woman, in the book, I called her the strong and versatile female lead because she does it all. And also, there's a call to action at the end of every chapter that's named after the said superhero. And the call to action is really, what is the one thing that comes out from the character of that superhero that we can emulate in our own life? And I think Wonder Woman is super decisive. She makes decisions, she makes them swiftly, and she's sure, and she goes with all of her guts. And in the movie, you can see that really well. she decides to leave the island. That's the first big decision she makes. And then there's this moment in the movie that is a defining moment for the character. And spoiler alert, guys! Spoiler alert. So if you didn't see the movie, you can just mute it for a second. But there's this decisive moment in the movie where she's in the trenches, and they're all scared to move forward. All the soldiers are scared. They're like, this is no man's land. You can't go there. You're gonna get shot. It's over if you just get out of the trenches. And she's like, this has to stop. And she just moves out of the trench, and she moves forward, and she gathers momentum because of her bravery, because of her decisiveness. Everybody starts following her, and it changes the tide of the battle.
So that's what's really great. I saw the movie myself. And, part of this decisiveness that you said, it's also that she acts swiftly, but with confidence and belief.
Yes.
And she knows what's morally right. She knows how to make decisions. And I think that so often that is an aspect that many women do have, and as well as men. So I don't want to make it gender specific, but the type of leadership we're talking about with this particular superhero, and it can be for both men and women, is one of confidence and swift decision making, and knowing what's moralistically right and sound and just. And I think that that's really important too, because so often we can be decisive in our decisions and moving forward, but it might not be serving the greater cause.
No, there's a certain impulsiveness there you need to be careful with. And sometimes being impulsive is not being decisive. So you got to be careful. It has to be a good decision that's been weighed and made with sound judgment before you actually go out and act it out.
Right. Okay, so let's look at the Spider-Man. You call him the self-sacrificing leader. I love that. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I myself am a lot like the Spider-Man leader. My wife keeps calling me a Spider-Man leader. See, the Spider-Man leader is very particular because I think of all the superheroes, Spider-Man is probably the one who's the most self-sacrificing. Like, people would argue saying, well, Superman is self-sacrificing. No, not really. Bullets bounce off him. Spider-Man can get killed. Spider-Man, at the end of many of his battles, has cuts, bruises. He needs days to recover sometimes. He's got a black eye, and he gets thrown across a wall, and he's not the Man of Steel. He's not made, so he gets bruised a lot. And so in the movies, we remember Spider-Man getting into all of these problems. And Stan Lee, when he created Spider-Man, what did he want to do? He wanted to create a superhero with problems. He said, I think young people are going to really, really identify with a superhero who has problems. So Spider-Man is always broke. Spider-Man has girlfriend problems. He's socially awkward because he's always swinging into action. He has trouble at school, trouble at work, and it shows up in his life. And yet, when you look at Spider-Man at face value, the self-sacrificing strength that he has to be willing to put everything on the line every day, that is super strong leadership. And it's the way that he goes out to serve the world. And I think the servant leadership quality of Spider-Man is to be emulated, is to be copied by us, to be modeled by us as leaders, as we strive to lead our lives and lead others' lives better.
That's a very interesting superhero to talk about, because I also sometimes will, when I coach and in my book, we'll talk about setting boundaries and not being totally self-sacrificing, excuse me, because you are vulnerable, because you have to still protect yourself. And as you said, Spider-Man sometimes will have his own wounds, and even though he wants to go out and rescue and be self-serving to others, or serving of others, not self-serving, but serving of others, it puts himself at risk. And I think that because he's not the Man of Steel, doesn't have this coat of armor that protects and shields him, that we can be impacted negatively in our actions for others, in good actions of others. And that there's a point where Spider-Man knows he can't make a difference in every situation. He might want to, but so I think there's a great parallel with all of these superheroes and the personas that we take on in leaderships and our gifts that we use, is to realize that we can make an impact in life, excuse me, impact in life, but that we also have to protect ourselves in the sense of how we have to realize that we are important. And when we honor ourselves and what we know is true and just and right, that then we can go out and serve. But we should not liquidate or make us feel that we're not as important to those that we serve. We are just as important, and that when we are stand into our truth, like you are standing into your passion of really doing what you're wanting to do, walking away from the Postal Service. You had to stand in that. You could have still been the mailman, and you could have been the superhero that knocked on doors when the elderly didn't come out and get their mail, or bring great advice to people that you saw along the road. You could have been a superhero as you were a mailman, but you still had to honor.
I've met some. Yeah.
Yeah, but you still had to honor your truth. And I think that's so important as people read your book, not to say, I need to be this, I need to be a better superhero, to really see that you can be a leader within yourself, and to not be this fictitious person or persona, but to be true to yourself. Would you agree with that, Sebastien?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. You have to be true to who you are. And always be mindful of others at the same time. So it's a delicate balance. You don't want to be so absorbed in yourself that you neglect others, but you don't also want to be so self-sacrificial that you neglect yourself and become ill, or become mentally ill, or become depressed or weak. So you got to have that balance all the time. There's this story we hear oftentimes in personal development about, in the airplane, the oxygen masks for the moms, right? And they say, if ever the plane is going to go down, if ever there's an emergency in the plane, and you have small children, you do not go with your first reflex of giving them the oxygen mask before you, because you're the one who's the caretaker of these kids. So you need the oxygen first, and then you give them some. Right. Then you, then them. And that's a hard thing to do for most moms. I mean, fathers maybe have a bit more facility doing that. They can maybe do it more easily than moms, I would say. But the mothers, they are so self-sacrificing that for them it's like it defies logic. And then when they're explained that it's really important for them to do that, if they want their little ones to survive, they get it. But their first reflex, if they weren't told, would be to grab that mask and put it on their kids. And what happens? Well, they would choke, and then the kids would have no chance at survival. It's the same thing when you're in a leadership position. If you don't take care of yourself, if you're not mindful of you, get some you time, then you won't have the strength and energy to invest in other people's lives.
Another thing I want to bring up here, which I think is so important, Sebastien, is that we need to honor that gift. So if you lead, if you're let's just say a woman, because women tend to be more self-sacrificing than men, typically, is that women often feel unappreciated because we are always giving of others. And so what happens in this is that you feel unappreciated, devalued. But see, what you really want to do is see that beautiful type of leadership, what you share to others, is a gift. Not that people are devaluing, not appreciating. That's not true. That's all in your mind. But when you see that this is your form of gift that you give outwardly, this is your form of leadership, that then you can honor your gift and see value in it yourself, not because the others are valuing you. So it's about us awakening to our own gifts and these leadership, as you call it, leadership traits that we all have, and we lead by different mechanisms. So I just want to put that out there, because I think part of us growing individually, seeing our uniqueness, seeing our gifts, is actually learning to appreciate them ourselves, not because necessarily others appreciate that in us. And we need to see our own gifts within ourselves to see our greatness. So just wanted to put that out there, because I think
absolutely
we value it based on what other people say. So let's go into...
And what happens when you embrace your gift?
Yeah. Sorry. Right. So we have some other...
What happens when you embrace your gifts is you joyfully, right?
Right. So what about Captain America? You refer to him as the unifier and strategist. I love that.
Oh, well, Captain America in the comics, if you ask anybody who knows comic books and you ask them the simple question, who is the best leader in comics? I would think maybe 8 to 9 times out of 10, his name will come out on top. There's 3 leaders in the book that really stand out. It's Captain America, Optimus Prime, and Superman for their leadership qualities. But Captain America is the gold standard in many, many ways. And he is a combination of pretty much everything we admire in good and strong leaders. He's self-sacrificing. He's morally upright. He's courageous. He's brave. He's got energy. He empowers others. He's going to, and what I love the most about him is that he's going to go in the trenches with his team. Mm-hmm. He's not going to send you out to do something he's not willing to do himself. He wants to be there in those trenches, doing it alongside you and leading, really showing you how. That's what he wants to do. That's what he likes. And that's why people follow him. They get so inspired by pretty much everything he stands for. And I just loved writing about him. And it's just so much fun to write the book on like, as you can see, I'm pretty passionate about it. But yeah, Captain America is and as I wrote the book, I realized there's some things that I had assumed about the character that were not quite right. I used to think that Captain America would stand for America, for the government, no matter what. But no, I realized that Captain America is actually, he stands for the values that made America great, not necessarily for the way they're lived today or for the way America portrays itself today or what they choose or what the government chooses today. So that there's a big distinction there.
That's
and
right.
That's what makes him really, really a good and upstanding leader.
I love it. I love it. And Professor X, which is kind of what you and I are both doing, is the recruiting, teaching, the mentoring. So in a way, we have this component because we're encouraging others. We're mentoring and teaching them to see their greatness, to see, to fulfill their passion and purpose. And so I love that too.
Yeah.
Well, it's amazing. I love
a lot of coaches are.
Go ahead.
A lot of coaches are Professor X leaders at heart. What gets them up in the morning is to see others empowered, to see others succeed, to see others getting to where they're supposed to be, becoming the best version of themselves. And Professor X leaders are experts at that. Professor X in the X-Men, he goes out and he recruits people on his team, and what he wants is for them to develop their gift and use it well for the benefit of themselves and humanity. So that's I see really a coach there, and I see a guy who has a tremendous amount of value to give. And I loved writing about Professor X. I think what he did with Wolverine is probably one of the best things, because Wolverine is like so rough around the edges and it's so hard. It's like hurting a cat, and it was so difficult at first to get Logan, Wolverine, to become who he's supposed to be. But in the last movie, the Logan movie, you can see that it actually stuck because Wolverine was the caretaker of Professor X, which is kind of amazing in a way.
Right. I love Wolverine. I love that character. He's fabulous. I really, he's gorgeous too. But I mean, so many times.
About Hugh Jackman or Wolverine here, because Wolverine in the comics is 5'3" and 195.
Oh, really?
And he's got an ugly mug. So it's not the same thing as Hugh Jackman, but Hugh Jackman portrayed the character so amazingly well that you gotta forget that little detail there.
Oh, that's funny. I've never read that comic book, but what I want to also mention here, which I think is really important, is that as they read your book, that you might find a type of superhero or a leadership skill set that you tend to have. And that I think you'll agree with me in that what can happen is, as you use one particular leadership style, is that you may say, I need to use this type of leadership in this role, in this capacity. So, for example, for someone who is self-sacrificing, does a lot for their family, a lot for the world, whether it's professional or personally, you might get to the point and say, I need to shift that a little bit. I need to take on the roles of, let's say, Professor X. I need to encourage and mentor my children to be more empowered for themselves. So I'm not always doing. I'm now shifting from the toddler to now the teenager family dynamics, and I need to be more of that Professor X. I need to step into that skill set, because it's also allowing them to be independent and eliminating some of my requirement to continue to always serve them and to be there for them. And so I think that's really important, that we don't have to be one particular hero and a form of leadership, that we can blend and interact and maybe find the area where you need to step into that is uncomfortable to you. So, for example, maybe you're not the assertive, aggressive, I'll put the word aggressive, but assertive leader that really takes charge and steps forward. Maybe that's not your persona, but maybe that's where you really need to step in to grow personally, that it would feel so awesome to be this leader of that's more profound, more step up and take notice, where typically you're kind of this quiet, passive, retreated type energy. Maybe you need to step in, and maybe a good way to look at that is say, I'm going to choose to be this character, this fictitious superhero, and if he can do it or she can do it, so can I. So it might be more of a role model that you can emulate to address some of those areas that you want to step into.
Yeah, well, I think most people, when they read the book, they won't identify with just one character. They might find like, I'm 75% Spider-Man and I have a 25% Batman or a 25% something else. And also, like you said, it's good to get the strengths of these leaders and try to bring it to our own lives. And I mean, it's leadership across the spectrum. And you can be decisive. You can develop a strong character like Captain America. You can show compassion and have great wisdom like Optimus Prime. You can be a super achiever like Superman. And there's all these calls to action at the end of the chapters that they all, like I said, they all bring something different to the table, but they're all essential things. In the end, when everything is said and done, they're all essential to good leadership.
Right. I can see this book being used in corporate America, where you have many different types of leadership and really getting people to step into that leadership capability. But I also can see this as a beautiful tool for parents to read and allow their children to, let's pretend we're going to be this character today. Let's work on, dress this cape or put on these little whatever to kind of take on that superhero persona, to emulate, to teach children and teens about being this leader, using and emulating their traits and seeing their remarkable ability within themselves to lead from within. And I think it's a wonderful book that really can touch everyone's lives. And I encourage you all to check it out, read the endorsements and the reviews. It's really amazing. So I hope you all will go out. And why don't you show them your book one more time,
Sure.
Sebastien?
Yeah. So the book is Lead Like a Superhero. Whoop. There you go. So people ask me, they don't ask me, but some people just don't notice the cover, because on top, this is Captain America's suit, is his costume. The middle part is Superman's cape. And the bottom part is Wonder Woman's shorts.
Oh, I see the stars, yes. Oh, nice.
So people think it's more like an American flag, but it's not an American flag. It's actually a triptychal cover that had all three major superheroes with a different texture, I guess you could add to that.
I love that. Oh, thank you for pointing that out. That's very ingenious. Who came up with that cover design?
The design was Morgan James, graphic artist, but the idea for the three parts, that was me. I proposed it. I said, great if on the cover we had like these three textures for the different costumes.
I love that.
And they ran with it. And the graphic artist at Morgan James came up with that cover, and I was blown away. I was like, this is just so perfect.
Exactly. Oh, well, that is wonderful. So, Sebastien, is there anything you want to leave our audience with? Some wise words, what you really feel that your book can give them? What would you like to say to our audience here?
Well, I think the book it was written on many different levels, and you pointed that out earlier by saying it's good for corporate America, but it's also good for young people. And it was written with that in mind. The book can add as much value to someone who's been in leadership for 20 years as a young man of 17 who is kind of is clueless about his life, doesn't know where he's going, and maybe had a rough childhood and doesn't have a role model. So that was me. I'm just describing myself at 17. And I taught that in another podcast. I was saying that there's two leadership lanes that are pretty much the main leadership lanes. The first lane is people who've been in contact with good leaders, people who have seen good leadership, whether by their parents, whether by their bosses, whether in the corporate world because they had a good job in the corporate world, and who just want more of it and want to become part of that, want to become a leader themselves. So there's this type of lane, but there's the other lane, which is oftentimes neglected and oftentimes the most impactful, is those who have lacked leadership in their lives, those who have had no leadership from their parents, those who struggle to find themselves, find their gifts, who had a rough life, and who crave leadership and who will do anything in their power to find that in their own lives, to be empowered. And when they actually find it, then they run with it and they become transformed and they really impact the lives of others. So that's the lane I'm coming from. That's how I came into leadership. And that's pretty much, I think it transpires a lot throughout the book. And I just want to encourage people that no matter what station you are in life, whether you're in the corporate world and crushing it, as we would say, or you're a young man and 20 years old, or a young woman 20 years old and just like struggling, trying to figure out life, what you want to do in life, what you want to be, and you're kind of maybe in your shell and you haven't come out of your shell yet, this book can help actually both types of people in both lanes.
That's beautiful. And I think, myself too, we all have our history, Sebastien, and if you didn't experience your lack of role model and the leadership that you had hoped for within your family dynamics, then you couldn't be writing a book passionately to say, hey, I can step out of this. I can rise above not having the role models or having these uncomfortable situations happen in my life or traumatic. So we can all rise above it, and not to say that, oh, poor me, I had these situations happen. No, it's like, how wonderful. I can now look at these situations as they were gifts because it allowed me to see what I needed to follow. What was my path to reach out into the world? How can I touch the world? How can I touch my own self and grow personally? And that's what this magic is all about, is seeing the super gifts within yourself, the superhero-ness within yourself. And so I really hope all of you go out and buy Sebastien's book. It's fabulous. I can't say enough about it. So lead like a superhero today. Go out and be the superhero that you want to be, emulating your leadership styles, and read his book and realize that we all have this within ourselves, every one of us. And you're remarkable, you're powerful beyond measure, and Lead Like a Superhero will help you get that life that you want to live passionately and joyfully. So Sebastien, thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, thank you, Cynthia, for having me. This was great. I mean, I love the way you go at it with the all the questions and the insight that you provide as well along the way. This is just super.
Well, it's a give and take. It's a give and take. Our books are live, living, breathing entities, and I say that truthfully because my book, when I talk with other guest hosts, who have me on their radio and television shows, it's they get to look at it from a different aspect. They integrate it differently. And every year, every time you read it, or you speak with someone else, you see it in a different viewpoint. There's so many avenues that allows it to breathe and take more form and to touch another person's life in a different way. So, it's just a beginning, and just wait for it to continue to grow and reach and be the cape that reaches around all of us and to help embrace us in its wisdom. So thank you so much for writing this. I really have enjoyed reading it, and look forward to posting my review for you as well. So thank you very much, Sebastien, and have a beautiful day.
Thank you so much, Cynthia. It's been great being on your show. Thank you.
Great. And to thank all the listeners that are here, remember to check out my website, CynthiaMazzaferro.com, and on Facebook, it's The Power Within, Cynthia Mazzaferro. Until our next time, be well. Remember, you are great and powerful beyond measure.